The sun of 7 was a dull orange thing that gave little warmth and even less hope. Cole wiped the dust from his face and continued digging into the rock. His hands were cracked and bleeding, but he had learned long ago not to complain. Complaining earned you a beating from the Dominion overseers, and beatings often led to death in the mining pits. Cole was 28 years old, though he felt much older. He had been born on Earth, a planet he barely remembered. His parents had brought him to this colony when he was just a child, believing the Dominion's promises of work and prosperity. Those promises had been lies. Within months of arriving, his parents had died from a sickness that swept through the worker camps. Cole had survived alone, growing up in the shadows of alien masters who saw humans as nothing more than tools. Around him, other workers labored in silence. There were humans like himself, pale and thin from years of poor food. There were warriors, their massive bodies bent low under chains that hummed with electric current. They were small with their silver skin and large dark eyes, moving quietly and avoiding the attention of the guards. All of them were slaves, though the Dominion never used that word. They called them contracted workers, but everyone knew the truth. The overseer of this section was a creature named. He stood nearly 3 meters tall, with armor that seemed to grow from his own skin. His species served the Dominion as enforcers and enjoyed his work far too much. Cole had seen him kill workers for moving too slowly. He had seen him laugh while doing it. But there was one person in the camp who made life bearable. Her name was, and she was an elder. They were known throughout the galaxy for their telepathic abilities and their gentle nature. They had been among the first species conquered by the Dominion, their peaceful ways making them easy targets. Most kept their heads down and did as they were told. Was different. She worked in the food distribution center, a position that allowed her to move freely through the camp. Over the years, she had used this freedom to help others in small ways. An extra portion of bread for a sick child, a warning whispered to a worker before an inspection, medicine smuggled from the overseer's supplies. Cole had benefited from her kindness many times, though he had never understood why she took such risks. On the day everything changed, Cole was working near the eastern wall when he heard shouting. He looked up to see Overseer dragging through the central yard. Her silver skin was marked with bruises, and her large eyes were filled with a calm that seemed impossible given her situation. The workers stopped and watched. They had no choice. When an overseer called for attention, you gave it or you died. Threw to the ground and addressed the crowd. His voice was amplified by the translator device embedded in his throat. He spoke of betrayal and theft. He spoke of a who had forgotten her place, who had dared to help the lesser creatures around her. He spoke of punishment. Cole felt his hands shaking. He wanted to do something, to rush forward and help her, but he knew it would be suicide. The guards had weapons that could reduce a human to ash in seconds. All he could do was watch. Pulled out a blade that glowed with pale light. It was a ceremonial weapon, designed to cause maximum pain before death. He raised it above, savoring the moment. And then looked directly at Cole. Her dark eyes found his across the crowded yard, and suddenly Cole felt something pushing against his mind. It was like a door opening inside his skull, a door he had never known existed. Images flooded through him, memories that were not his own. A green world covered in singing forests, a civilization of peace and learning, a darkness that came from the stars and consumed everything, and beneath all of that something else, a spark of power that burned like a small sun. The blade came down, made no sound as it pierced her chest, but Cole felt her die. He felt it like a piece of himself being torn away, and with her death the spark she had given him exploded outward. Cole collapsed to the ground, his body shaking. Workers around him backed away in fear. The guards moved toward him, their weapons raised. But before they could reach him, other workers surrounded Cole and blocked him from view. A named picked him up like he weighed nothing and carried him into the tunnels beneath the camp. Cole drifted in and out of consciousness for 3 days. He saw things during that time, visions of the past and glimpses of the future. He saw the Dominion as it once was before the corruption set in. He saw the Hollow Court, a faction of shadow creatures that had infiltrated the Empire's leadership and twisted it into a machine of conquest. He saw worlds burning and species dying. And he saw himself, standing at the center of a great change. When he finally woke, he was in a small cave lit by stolen light strips. Mills, the human doctor who ran a secret clinic in the tunnels, sat beside him. She was checking his vital signs with equipment she had built from salvaged parts. Cole tried to speak, but his voice came out as a croak, gave him water and told him to rest. But Cole could not rest. The memories had given him were too clear, too urgent. He needed to tell someone what he had learned. He needed to tell them about the truth hidden behind the Dominion's power. He needed to tell them that the galaxy was built on lies. And he needed to tell them that change was coming, whether the Masters wanted it or not. Cole looked at his hands. They seemed the same as before, still cracked and from years of labor, but he could feel something different inside them now, a warmth that pulsed like a heartbeat, a power that had never belonged to humans before. Had given him a gift with her dying breath. She had believed in humanity enough to share her people's most sacred ability. Now Cole had to decide what to do with that gift. He thought of the workers above, still digging in the pits. He thought of his parents, buried in unmarked graves. He thought of all the species suffering under the Dominion's rule. And he made a choice. He would not let sacrifice be meaningless. He would not let her gift go to waste. He would find a way to fight back even if it killed him, because some things were worth dying for. Cole closed his eyes and let the power inside him grow. Somewhere above, the overseers went about their business, unaware that everything was about to change, unaware that a single human born from alien sacrifice was about to ignite a fire that would spread across the stars. 3 weeks had passed since death, and Cole was learning to live with a stranger inside his mind. The power she had given him was unpredictable. Some days it lay quiet, a warm presence at the edge of his thoughts. Other days it surged without warning, causing lights to flicker and machines to spark. Twice he had accidentally read the emotions of workers passing by, their fear and exhaustion flooding into him like cold water. Mills watched him carefully during this time. She had moved him to a deeper part of the tunnel system, a place the overseers did not know existed. There she ran tests with her salvaged equipment, trying to understand what had done to him. The results made no sense. Human brains were not supposed to show psionic activity. The ability to read minds or move objects with thought was something only a few species possessed, and humans were not among them. Yet Cole's brain scans showed patterns that had only seen in medical texts. Somehow, had changed him at a fundamental level. Cole spent his nights sorting through the memories she had left behind. Most were fragments, brief images of her before the Dominion came, the faces of family members long dead, the pain of watching her people reduced to servants. But among these personal memories was something larger, a history that the Dominion had tried to erase. The Empire had not always been evil. Thousands of years ago, it had been a genuine alliance of species working together for mutual benefit. But then the Hollow Court had appeared. No one knew where they came from or what they truly were. Some memories suggested they were beings from another dimension, creatures that fed on suffering and control. They had infiltrated the highest levels of the Dominion and slowly twisted it into a tool for their hunger. Cole shared this knowledge with, and she believed him. She had seen too much cruelty to think the Dominion was simply harsh but fair. There was something wrong at its core, something that delighted in pain. Visited them often. The massive warrior had saved Cole's life by carrying him into the tunnels, and he seemed to feel responsible for him now. At first was suspicious of Cole's new abilities. They had suffered greatly under the Dominion, their warrior culture crushed, and their people scattered as slaves across 100 worlds. They had learned to trust no one. But then Cole touched his hand and accidentally saw into his memories. He saw a green planet with towering mountains. He saw as a young warrior, proud and free. He saw the day the Dominion ships darkened the sky. And he saw the arena where he had been forced to fight his own brothers for the entertainment of their masters. Cole spoke of these things aloud, tears running down his face, stared at him in shock. No one could have known those details, no one except himself. From that moment the warrior believed, and he was not alone. Word spread quietly through the worker camps. A human had been given a gift by the dying elder. A human could see into minds and hearts. A human carried the truth about the Dominion's corruption. Workers began seeking Cole out, coming to the hidden tunnels in small groups. They came from every species, humans and others whose names Cole was still learning. All of them shared the same look in their eyes, the look of people who had nothing left to lose. Cole told them what he knew. He showed them images from his memories, projecting them directly into their minds. It was exhausting work, and each time he did it, he felt the power inside him grow slightly stronger, slightly more dangerous. Within 3 weeks, their circle had grown to 30 members. They met in the deepest tunnels, sharing stories of their suffering. For many, it was the first time they had spoken freely in years. Among the new members was an ancient alien named Elder. His species had been conquered so long ago that few remembered their original name. His body was failing, his skin hanging loose on brittle bones. But his mind was still sharp, and he carried knowledge that made Cole's heart race. There had been rebellions before, many of them. All had failed. But during the last great uprising, nearly 3 centuries ago, the rebels had discovered something, a communication system that predated the Dominion itself. They called it the Resonance Network. It was built into the fabric of space itself, nodes hidden on thousands of worlds. If activated, it could broadcast a message to every corner of the galaxy simultaneously. The rebels had tried to use it but were destroyed before they could succeed. The Dominion had spent centuries hunting down the nodes and sealing them, but they could not find them all. Cole searched through his memories and found what he was looking for. A map buried deep in historical records. A map showing the location of a resonance node right here on 7, right beneath the mining facility where they labored every day. The group began to plan. Above them, the overseers continued their routines, unaware of the whispers spreading through the camp. Supervisor, a mid-ranking bureaucrat who managed the colony's paperwork, noticed that something felt different. Workers seemed more alert. Conversations stopped when guards approached. He sent a report to his superiors requesting additional security. Cole knew they had to move soon. Once more soldiers arrived, any chance of reaching the node would disappear. They chose the next maintenance shutdown, a 12-hour period when the mining equipment was powered down for repairs. During that window, the security grid would be weakened. On the night before the shutdown, Cole gathered his inner circle. A young woman named who worked in the communication center and had agreed to monitor guard movements. An elder who insisted on coming despite his failing health. Cole looked at their faces in the dim light. Humans and aliens united by shared pain, by shared hope, by the memory of an elder who had died believing that change was possible. He did not make a speech. There was nothing to say that they did not already know. Instead, he simply nodded and led them deeper into the tunnels. Toward the node. Toward the first spark of a fire that would burn across the stars. The maintenance shutdown began at midnight. Across the mining facility, machines fell silent and lights dimmed to emergency levels. Workers were confined to their barracks, and most guards gathered in the central compound for their shift rotation. It was the moment Cole had been waiting for. He moved through the tunnels with at his side. The warrior carried no weapons. They had none worth carrying. But his massive fists had killed Dominion soldiers before, and Cole found comfort in his presence. Behind them came an elder. The old alien moved slowly, each step an effort, but he refused to stay behind. He had waited 3 centuries to see the resonance network activated. He would not miss this chance. His voice crackled through the stolen communication device in Cole's ear. She was watching the guard movements from her position in the communication center. So far, everything was going according to plan. The path to the node was clear. The entrance to the ancient chamber was hidden behind a collapsed section of tunnel. Cole would never have found it without his memories guiding him. He placed his hands against the stone and pushed with his mind. The power inside him responded, and the rocks shifted aside as if moved by invisible hands. Beyond was a passage that had not been walked in. The walls were covered in symbols that glowed faintly as Cole approached. Writing, he realized. This place had been built by his ancestors long before the Dominion existed, long before the Hollow Court corrupted everything. The chamber at the end of the passage took Cole's breath away. It was vast, carved from living crystal that pulsed with inner light. At its center stood a pillar of pure white stone, covered in the same glowing symbols, the resonance node. Elder fell to his knees at the sight of it. Tears streamed down his weathered face. He spoke in his native language, words that Cole could not understand but somehow felt, words of grief and hope and desperate longing. Cole approached the node slowly. He could feel its power even from a distance. It was old, older than the Dominion, older than the civilization that had hidden it here. It was a remnant of something ancient and vast, a network that had once connected all intelligent life in the galaxy. He placed his hands on the stone and felt it respond to his touch. The symbols blazed brighter, and suddenly he was aware of other nodes across the galaxy. Thousands of them. Most were sealed or destroyed, but some still flickered with dormant power. Waiting, listening. Cole did not have time for a complex message. He could already hear distant alarms through his communication device. was warning him that guards were moving toward the tunnels. Someone had noticed something wrong. So Cole sent the simplest message he could. He gathered images from his mind and from his memories. Images of the mining camps and the workers suffering in them. Images of chains and beatings and unmarked graves. The faces of the enslaved, human and alien alike. And beneath all of that, a single emotion that needed no translation. Hope. The pulse went out across the network. Cole felt it spread like ripples in still water, reaching worlds he had never heard of and species he could not name. For a brief moment, every oppressed creature in the galaxy felt the same thing. Felt that they were not alone. Felt that someone was fighting back. Then the connection broke, and Cole collapsed to the ground. Caught him before he hit the stone. The warrior lifted him easily and turned toward the exit. There was no time to rest. The alarms were growing louder. They made it back to the hidden tunnels just as Dominion soldiers began pouring into the lower levels. Had scrambled the security sensors, buying them precious minutes. But it would not be enough. The Dominion would tear the camp apart looking for the source of that transmission. The next 3 days were a nightmare of fear and violence. Commandant arrived with a full battalion of soldiers, his ship darkening the sky above the colony. He was a creature of cold efficiency, and he immediately began systematic interrogations. Workers were dragged from their barracks and questioned for hours. Some were beaten. Some disappeared entirely. The Dominion demanded to know who had activated the ancient technology. They demanded names and locations and proof of conspiracy. But no one talked. Not the humans. Not even the timid who had always tried to avoid attention. Something had changed in the camp. The message Cole had sent had touched every worker, and they had felt the truth in it. They had felt that they were part of something larger than themselves. Cole remained hidden in the deepest tunnels, his power slowly recovering. He listened through stolen communication devices as grew more frustrated. The commandant could not understand why these slaves refused to break. He could not understand that they had already broken years ago, and that breaking further held no fear for them. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, the message was spreading. On a dozen worlds, workers whispered about the transmission they had received. On 100 more, resistant cells that had been dormant for generations began to stir. The resonance network had done its work. The spark had been lit. And in the orbital shipyards above a distant planet, a young human officer named Lisa Cole received the transmission and saw her brother's face among the images. She had not seen him since they were children, since their parents had taken him to a colony world and left her in Dominion military training. She had believed the propaganda. She had served the Empire faithfully. But now she stared at the suffering in those images and felt something crack inside her. She looked at the Dominion uniform she wore and wondered what she had become. And far away in the darkness beneath 7, Cole opened his eyes and felt the galaxy beginning to wake. Was captured on the 7th day. Cole learned of it through desperate whisper over the communication device. The Dominion soldiers had found the secret clinic in the tunnels. They had arrested everyone inside, had been taken to the central compound, where Commandant was personally overseeing the interrogations. The news hit Cole like a physical blow, had saved his life. She had believed in him when he barely believed in himself, and now she was going to die because of that belief. Placed a heavy hand on Cole's shoulder. The warrior did not speak. He did not need to. His meaning was clear. If they tried to rescue, they would likely die. But if they did nothing, they would lose something far more important than their lives. Cole gathered the remaining members of their circle. There were only 15 now. Others had been captured or had gone into deeper hiding, but those who remained were ready to fight. They had weapons now, stolen during the chaos of the past week. Energy pistols and mining tools modified into crude blades. Not enough to win a war, but perhaps enough for one desperate rescue. The plan was simple because they had no time for complexity. Would create a distraction in the communication center, triggering false alarms across the facility. While the guards responded to the phantom emergencies, Cole would lead a small team into the central compound. They would find and get her out before could execute her. It was a terrible plan. Cole knew it would cost lives, but he also knew that leaving to die would break something in their movement that could never be repaired. They moved at sunset, when the orange light of the dying sun made shadows long and deep. The false alarms worked perfectly. Guards rushed toward the western sector, leaving the central compound with minimal protection. Cole felt their confusion through his psionic senses, a storm of frustration and uncertainty. The compound was a cold building of gray metal, designed to intimidate rather than shelter. Cole and entered through a service tunnel, emerging in a storage room filled with Dominion supplies. From there, they made their way toward the detention cells. They encountered 4 guards in the corridors, dealt with 3 of them before Cole could even react. The warrior moved with a speed that seemed impossible for his massive frame, his fists crushing armor and bone with equal ease. The 4th guard Cole stopped with his mind, reaching into the creature's thoughts and simply shutting them off. The guard collapsed, unconscious but alive. Cole did not know how he felt about that. The power had given him could kill as easily as heal. He had not tested its limits, and he was not sure he wanted to. They found in the deepest cell. She was bruised and bleeding, but her eyes were clear. She had not broken. She had told them nothing. Tore the door off its hinges, and Cole helped to her feet. She leaned on him heavily, but she managed a weak smile. The escape did not go smoothly. Alarms began screaming as they reached the outer corridor. Guards converged from multiple directions. Cole threw up barriers of psionic force, blocking weapons fire that would have killed them all. The effort left him dizzy and gasping, but he kept moving. 3 of their team died in the corridors. A human man named Peter, who had joined them only days ago. 2 siblings who had volunteered knowing they might not survive. They fell covering the retreat, their bodies left behind as Cole and the survivors fled into the tunnels. The cost was real, the cost was terrible, but was alive and their movement was still intact. That night, as they rested in the deepest part of the tunnel system, Cole felt something brush against his mind. It was not a human thought or a memory. It was something older and stranger, a voice that seemed to come from the resonance network itself. The Watcher. It spoke in images rather than words. Cole saw a collective consciousness, formed from the preserved minds of rebellion leaders who had died centuries ago. They had uploaded themselves into the network before their deaths, hopping to guide future generations. They had watched Cole's transmission spread across the galaxy. They had seen the spark catch fire. And now they offered him a choice. The Watcher could amplify Cole's abilities, making him strong enough to broadcast not just emotions, but thoughts directly into the minds of beings across the galaxy. Strong enough to show the Dominion's soldiers the truth about their masters. Strong enough to shatter the lies that held the Empire together. But the process was dangerous. Human minds were not built for this kind of power. The enhancement could kill him, probably would kill him. Cole thought about the workers still suffering in the camps above. He thought about his parents in their unmarked graves. He thought about and her dying gift. And he thought about the 3 people who had died tonight so that he could have this chance. He accepted the Watcher's offer. The process felt like being torn apart and rebuilt at the same time. Cole screamed until his voice gave out, and then he screamed in silence. His mind expanded beyond anything he had ever imagined, touching the edges of the galaxy itself. He felt millions of lives, all of them suffering, all of them waiting for something to change. When it was over, he lay on the cold stone floor, barely breathing. Rushed to his side, checking his vital signs with trembling hands. He should have been dead. The Watcher said so, its voice full of something like wonder. No human had ever survived this process. None had ever been stubborn enough, or desperate enough, or simply too foolish to know when to quit. But Cole was still alive, changed beyond recognition, carrying power that no human had ever held. And somewhere above the planet, Admiral's battle fleet had just dropped out of faster-than-light travel, its weapons aimed at the colony. The final confrontation was coming, and Cole finally had the strength to face it. Admiral's ultimatum reached the colony at dawn. His voice boomed from every speaker in the facility, calm and cold and utterly without mercy. The rebels had one standard day to surrender their leaders. If they refused, his fleet would reduce 7 to ash. Every worker, every building, every trace of life would be erased. Cole listened to the announcement from the tunnel entrance, watching the sky where the Admiral's ships hung like metal clouds. There were dozens of them, warships armed with weapons that could crack planets. Against such power, what could a handful of slaves do? But Cole was no longer just a slave, and the power inside him was no longer just a gift from a dying friend. It was something new, something that connected him to the resonance network and the collective consciousness of every rebellion that had come before. He gathered his people one last time. Fewer than 50 remained, a mixture of species bound together by suffering and hope. They looked at him with eyes that held no illusion about their chances. They knew they were probably going to die. Cole told them the truth. He could not guarantee victory. He could not promise that any of them would survive the day. But he could offer them something that the Dominion had tried to take from them. A choice. They could hide and wait for death, or they could stand and fight for something larger than themselves. Every single one of them chose to fight. The plan was desperate but simple. Cole would use the Resonance Network one final time, broadcasting not just to other enslaved worlds, but directly into the minds of the Dominion soldiers themselves. He would show them the truth about the Hollow Court. He would show them what their empire had become. And while the fleet was confused, the resistance on the ground would strike at the remaining Dominion forces in the colony. It was not a plan for victory. It was a plan for making their deaths mean something. Cole climbed to the surface as the deadline approached. Walked beside him, the massive warrior carrying a weapon salvaged from a fallen soldier. Behind them came and the others, armed with whatever they had managed to find. They emerged into the orange light of morning and faced the central compound where Commandant had gathered his remaining forces. The Dominion soldiers laughed when they saw the ragged group approaching. They raised their weapons and prepared to fire. Cole closed his eyes and reached for the Resonance Network. The power flowed through him like fire and ice combined. He felt the nodes across the galaxy awakening, felt the collective consciousness of the Watcher adding its strength to his own. And then he pushed outward, sending everything he knew directly into the minds of every being within reach. The Dominion soldiers saw the truth. They saw the Hollow Court, the shadow creatures that puppeted their leaders and fed on suffering. They saw the countless species crushed beneath their boots, not for order or progress, but simply because the things controlling the empire needed pain to survive. They saw themselves as they truly were, tools of an ancient evil that had corrupted everything good about their civilization. Some soldiers screamed and dropped their weapons. Others fell to their knees, weeping. A few tried to block out the visions, but Cole's power was too strong. The truth could not be unseen. Above the planet, the same vision struck Admiral's fleet. Officers on the bridge of the flagship staggered back from their consoles. Soldiers in the weapon bays released their triggers. For a crucial moment, the entire fleet was paralyzed. And in that moment, Captain Lisa Cole made her choice. She had been serving on a supply vessel attached to the fleet, a minor position that matched her minor rank. But she had seen her brother's face in the original transmission. She had felt the truth in his message. And now, watching the chaos spread through the fleet, she acted. Her vessel was small and lightly armed, but it was enough. She turned it toward Admiral's flagship and opened fire, targeting the weapon arrays that were aimed at the planet below. Other ships followed. Officers who had seen the truth and could not stomach serving lies any longer. Soldiers who remembered destroyed by the empire they had sworn to protect. The fleet began firing on itself, a civil war erupting in the space above 7. On the ground, the resistance attacked, led the charge, his roar echoing across the compound. Workers who had been cowering in their barracks emerged with makeshift weapons, joining the fight. The Dominion forces, still reeling from Cole's mental assault, could not organize a defense. Commandant died in the first minutes, cut down by a who had suffered under his interrogations. His guards followed shortly after. By the time the sun had climbed halfway up the sky, the colony was free. But the cost was terrible. Fell defending a group of workers from a final Dominion counterattack. He died with a smile on his face, the first peace he had known since his burn. Others fell beside him, their names spoken by survivors who vowed to remember them. In orbit, Admiral's flagship exploded. Lisa Cole's vessel limped away from the debris, damaged but intact. She turned toward the planet's surface and began her descent, not knowing if her brother still lived. Cole stood in the center of the ruined compound, his body trembling with exhaustion. The power inside him had burned to embers, leaving him hollow and aching. But he could feel something new through the Resonance Network. Other worlds rising up. Other fleets fragmenting as the truth spread. Other slaves choosing to fight rather than submit. The Dominion was not defeated. The Hollow Court still controlled vast territories and commanded terrible weapons. The war that was beginning would last years, perhaps decades. Many more would die before it ended. But standing there, surrounded by survivors of a dozen species, Cole understood something important. Sacrifice had not been in vain. The gift she had given him had grown into something larger than either of them could have imagined. A spark that had become a fire. a fire that was spreading across the galaxy. Ships began arriving that evening, vessels from worlds that had received his message and sent whatever they could spare, not to conquer but to help, to join, to be part of something new. Cole watched them descend through the orange sky, and he allowed himself to hope, not for victory, which was uncertain, not for peace, which was far away, but for the simple truth that had believed in from the beginning. That beings from different worlds could stand together, that sacrifice could have meaning, that even the darkest empire could be challenged by those with nothing left to lose. He was human, born from alien sacrifice, and he had ignited a rebellion that would change the galaxy forever.